Hi, I'm Rachel Evans, co-founder and business consultant for New Edge. I want to talk to you today about something that may be controversial for some. It's about the idea of client toxicity. We grow up and we're often led to believe that the customer is always right, but this often isn't actually the case, and that sometimes, occasionally, we may have, or we may in fact be, a toxic client. The reason for this conversation today is because I've written about this in the past, and just recently I had another consultant come up to me to talk about this very subject. They thought they might have a toxic client. And I'm just going to give you a quick recap on that conversation without revealing any names, locations, etc. So, my friend, the consultant, has a client. They're a long-standing client, and it's always been a good relationship. It's been very positive, it's been very collaborative. There's a lot of involvement in strategic conversations about trying to help in working together to plan for the future. It's a very, very much always been a partnership in the past. But recently they'd noticed that had changed, and in fact the past 12 months had become increasingly difficult. So I spoke to them about this and asked what had changed, and the first and most obvious change was a change in personnel. The person that they dealt with on a daily basis had changed, and they found that the relationship wasn't what it was before. And we obviously discussed this idea that when we talk to a company, we are also talking to individuals, and that yes, if the person changes, then it's not unreasonable to expect a different type of conversation, sometimes a different tone, a different pace, and sometimes when we change personnel within companies, we also bring with that person a change in objectives, and that a certain amount of variation was to be expected. And indeed, if there was no change, then that was really going to be a bit of a surprise. But this was something else, in that yes, they could recognise that there were definitely personality changes, but they actually felt that overall that the relationship had changed. And so we discussed some of the conversations, and one of the things that I took them as a scenario I took them through was this idea that we ought to examine how the client talks about other suppliers rather than them about them. And this can be quite highlighting. In this particular scenario, as we delve deeper into those conversations, we found that there was definitely a pattern. Their client felt that they were always right, that other suppliers somehow didn't get it, they didn't understand. They didn't understand the business objectives, they didn't understand why they were being engaged, and what they were actually meant to deliver, as if they didn't understand their own products and services. The client always believed that they knew better than the suppliers, and it didn't matter who the supplier was and what they provided, whether it's financial services, technology services, business consulting, or HR, and so on and so forth. The client always felt that they knew everything better than the different suppliers. That the customer was the expert. We noticed that all of the different suppliers faced the same challenges, in that they were constantly being criticised. That thank you had gone from the conversation, and it is very much about trying to gain the upper hand in a conversation, that somehow the client was doing the supplier a favour by continuing the relationship. The supplier, both for my friend the consultant and other suppliers, other customers, felt that and had observed that the customer was getting later and later with their payments. What were 30-day terms had slipped to 35, then 45, 60, and in some cases 90 days. That paying the suppliers was no longer a priority. And really, for them, from a customer point of view, they thought that was perfectly acceptable, and indeed questioning it was proving to be a bit of a challenge. The client was also demanding more and more favours, expecting exceptions, more and more understanding. They were moving further and further from the terms of the engagement, and saying terms such as we're growing, we're expanding, you need to understand, you need to work with us. And that somehow this client over any other client deserved special attention. And we started to see that there were some systemic problems. It was also noted that the client was going through a period of fast growth, which is absolutely fantastic. And they were skilling up, they were hiring more resources, they were getting better facilities. They were really trying to accommodate their growth. But the suppliers, on the other hand, were being expected to cope with this growth with no revision in terms of the time they were allowed, the facilities they were given, and they were not allowed to discuss their contracts. They were expected just to suck it up until the end of the year. And this was clearly a change of scope. Overall, the impression was that the supplier was becoming arrogant and at times demeaning and patronising, and this was becoming normal. And the list went on, and it was clear in listening to my friend, the consultant, about their own engagement and the engagement of other consultants, that this was definitely a systemic problem, and that what they actually had was a toxic client. Now, if you're a client and you think you might be better than your suppliers, that you might know more, that you have a right to demand more, to expect more without compensation, then you might just be a toxic client yourself. It's a fine line. It's a difficult one to get right at times, because everybody wants a partnership, everybody wants a long-term relationship. But if you're expecting more and more, you're growing yourself, and you're not compromising in terms of your expectations on your own suppliers, then yeah, you very well may be one of those horrible toxic customers. It's something that's very easy to address. Awareness is really 90% of the solution. Once you are aware that you have a toxic client, you can start to take action, and you can actually start to look deeper into what you're giving them versus what you're being recognised for. You need to look at not just the financial aspect, but also the risk reward. Are you being asked to give more and more and carry greater risk? Are you being expected to accept greater liability? Are you being asked to do things that are out of your scope, for example? These are all parts of that consideration. Conversely, if you are the customer and you are demanding more from your suppliers, and you're not compromising, you are expecting more and more, you're not giving them the room to breathe, you're treating it as a one-sided relationship, you expect they must give, then yes, you're a toxic supplier. But like I said, awareness is everything. As soon as you're aware, you can start to take the appropriate action. It's common, it's not unusual, especially in a high growth environment. Personalities are key, both from a supplier and a customer perspective, so please make sure you get that right. If you have, or you are a toxic supplier, please drop me a call. I can help, and I'm happy to have that conversation with you, and we'll see what we can do. That's it really. Thank you for your time today. You have a good day. I hope in some way this was useful. Thank you. Bye.